This is a re-upload of a video I put out ages ago under a different name. Basically, when I first signed up to Reddit or Discord or something, I chose the name Pagoda just on a whim because it's a fun word to say. Pagoda. 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 And then I just couldn't be asked to think of anything better when I started YouTube. But now I have the name I want, so I'm just re-uploading everything so it's not as confusing. Enjoy! Today I'm going to be painting some Eldar Guardians in my new vibrant pink colour scheme. Now the colours I'm using here are quite reminiscent of the Craftworld Alaitoc, which isn't really an accident. I love the story of Alaitoc and its figurehead Morgan Ra. When the Eldari Empire fell, Alaitoc was far enough from the heart of the Empire to escape the initial shockwave. However, they were too close to the Eye of Terror and they weren't able to escape. There they suffered for 10,000 years, until Morgan Ra said enough was enough and went in to get them. He managed to rescue them, but since then the other Eldari treat them with suspicion. They feel like they must have been tainted by the chaos presence they were in. And it's sometimes said that they only speak to each other and only in hushed whispers. Honestly, it's so edgy, but like, whatever, it's 40k, you gotta go big or go home, right? I'm an emo anyway. Anyway, onto the painting. I started with a primer of Vallejo Grey surface primer just through my airbrush here. We just want a nice bright base coat for the colours to go over. Now this may seem counterintuitive, but I promise there's a method here. We're going to base coat it with Vallejo Game Heavy Black Green. Now that's watered down, about 2 parts water to 1 part paint, so that's going to run into all those little crevices really well. You'll see here that I'm using an old brush. I just get a load of paint on and glob it straight on there, then move it around on the model. You can kind of wick bits back up as well. The main thing you want to be careful of is that you're getting things into all those crevices. You want a nice good shadow there, and this is our shadow colour, so just get that coverage, baby. This bit is simple but boring, so just get it done. As you can see there, some bits pull on the gun, but I just move it around, just keep wicking it back up, placing it on other parts of the models, and it's all good. Next we're going to do a Zenthial prime. This is meant to simulate light hitting the top of the model and accentuating the kind of head, guns, protruding areas, things that you really want that to. So we're going to just dry brush any white and we're going to focus on the top. Any smaller, protruding or kind of detailed areas, what you want to do is brush kind of in a downwards motion. That way you'll catch all the paint to the top there and you'll give it that appearance that it's caught the sunlight. You can see here that I'm really focusing on the head, the backpack thing, the gun, just to make sure that all those areas really stand out as really bright. This is going to help us a lot in the next stage. Now it's finally time to add in some of our pink, and for that we're going to use Citadel Contrast Volupus Pink? Volupus Pink? Volupus. Anyway, we're watering that down with some contrast medium so that we get a real kind of clear light coverage. What that's going to do is leave a lot of the white there, and then it's also going to mix with some of that green. Now the reason we used green is that it's a contrasting colour. In a lot of other painting styles you'll see that they actually use colour to create the illusion of shadow, which is what I'm trying to do here. So this watered down is going to leave some of that green there. Sometimes the pink is going to pool and create a lot of a darker colour mixing with the green, and we're just going to get a lot of tonal variance there. So there you go, in my opinion that's already looking really cool. You've got so much like high tones and darks. We're going to try and go for like a non-metallic metal vibe. We're going to go for a lot of contrast on this. Anyway, now we're blocking in the dark grey / purpley area with Citadel Eshin Grey. Now I've mixed that about 1:1 with some contrast medium so that we just get some natural highlights and dark areas kind of forming there. So we're just going to block in the helmet, the shoulder pads, the chest plates and that barrel stock gun part thing. Yeah. Next up, we're using Stonewall Grey by Game Colour. Now I've watered this down quite a bit because we've already dry brushed quite a lot of white onto there, and we want the weapons to be white anyway. So what we're using is this is more of a wash to just take away some of that green tones that we've got still in the gaps there. So we'll be blocking in the gun, equipment, faceplate, and of course the little wrist and ankle clip things. They're just cool details. I like those. Now this guy looks fine, but he could look better. Like, he's pink now, but he needs to be pink. So for that we're using Magenta Fluorescent by Model Colour. Now I wanted to try something a bit different here, so I'm glazing this on in a particular way. Instead of just going for like an edge highlight type thing, what I do is refer back to the model from about this angle and about this angle, then brighten up that pink anywhere that's like fully visible from those areas. What I want this to do is to add into that semi non-metallic metal feel and give it like a shimmery kind of look, like from certain angles it's catching the light. So I've watered this down quite heavily, so it's kind of almost like a glaze consistency, maybe a bit stronger than your typical glaze would be. But as you see here, I kind of go back and forth, allow bits to dry, just kind of like layer up that pink until I get a really nice consistency there. Now what I'm also doing here is I'm trying to avoid the edges because we've already got some nice edge highlighting from the fact that we used a contrast paint. Spoiler alert, I do go back and have to edge highlight anyway because I want it brighter. But really the good thing about contrast is that you get those established areas of highlight and shadow. So we try and work with it. Now in some instances I am painting areas that perhaps you can't see from the angles I showed, but that face that same general direction anyway. Basically, Eldar have a lot of curves that you really want to accentuate and make these models kind of pop. Oh, just look at it, getting so bright there. My main army at the moment is Necrons in a really grimdark style, so this has just been a complete break from that. This guy is going to look so good on the battlefield. He's going to be really well camouflaged if he ever has to fight in a highlighter factory. Now we're going to do a similar, kind of more toned down version of this on the grey purple bits. So what I'm using here is Game Air Alien Purple. The reason I'm using a paint for an airbrush here is because they have this quite thin consistency that works quite nicely as a glaze really. So if I have them I do tend to use them. Also I bought that one by accident once because I wasn't really paying attention in the shop, so got to get it used somehow really. Now as before we're using the same angles, we're creating that shimmery kind of effect. I've added a little bit of that purple into the head and the shoulders where we could see clearly from the angles we said before. Now we are edge highlighting, so using Model Colours Off-White, I'm just going to mix that about 50-50 with the fluorescent magenta that we were using before. So as you've probably heard before, you'd rather use the edge of your brush rather than the tip when edge highlighting. It just gives you a much cleaner line. Where that's not possible, the Eldar do have a few plates that kind of sit right next to each other rather than having corners. You really just want to wipe your brush clean of most of the paint so that it's not coming off in a uncontrolled kind of messy line. You really want to just get a nice neat line, as you can see here. One thing you can also do, as you see me do in the next shot, is come back in with the fluorescent magenta and just make that line a lot thinner there. It's actually quite a good habit to get into because you can really make those lines nice and crisp and neat there. Next up, we're taking our off-white, we're using that pure, and we're just going to touch those corners just very gently. Just add those highest high points. Now, I decided the grey-purple area didn't have enough contrast yet, so I decided to use some Nuln oil, just wash that down there so we had some really deep, dark shading. And this also helps just unify the black and the purple together there. So now we are edge highlighting the purple grey area. So what I did, I took a 1-1 mix of my off-white and my Eshin grey. I just added like the slightest, just the tiniest touch of purple on my brush so that it had that tint to it, and then went along and edge highlighted. Then again, I took my pure off-white and just added it just to the very corners of the raised areas there. One thing I'd like to point out is that whenever you're painting, the paint always collects where you leave your brush. This is something that you'd use it when glazing quite a bit. However, you can also use it when edge highlighting. As you see here, I turned the chest plate upside down so that I'm pulling the paint up towards the top. And what that does is just give us a nice transition because the paint is strongest where the brush leaves the model. Of course, never forget the little clippy bits. While doing the white, I decided to take my off-white and do a dry brush over the weapon. I really wanted the white to come across as the main colour rather than just the highlight, and this has quite a lot of area, so I decided to dry brush that to get a bit of that gradient, and then I come back in with the brush and block out those areas that I really want to stand out. So finishing off with the eyes and the small details, which are going to be teal or a turquoisey colour. I really like that, and it's going to contrast nicely. So the easiest method I've found to do eyes, and the one that I can be bothered to do, is to fill it in with white first of all. Now you just want to like saturate that whole eye socket with white. As you can see there, it's a bit watered down, just so it'll flow into all the recesses of that eye, but it's still thick enough that it'll get a nice coverage there. So now I take game coloured turquoise and I'm painting the little armband. You can do more details here. This guy I'm leaving fairly simple, but sometimes they have those little stripes on the little back antenna things. Sometimes they might want details on the helmets, things like that. But this guy's just getting the armband. Now for the next part of this eye, we're going to really water down that turquoise and then just literally put it into the socket there. And what that'll do is that'll leave the white in the kind of middle part of the eye, whilst really saturating the outer area of the eye socket, and just give it this kind of cool glowy effect where you don't really need to worry too much about even highlighting it back up. So I finished basing it, and here's the final product. Hopefully you took from this video that you can experiment with colour as much as you like, and you got some slightly novel approaches to how you do your colours. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Ed, and I will see you in the next video.